G'day, brothers and sisters. This is the other Paul, and welcome to another episode of Recommended Sources. Today, I am recommending a very helpful text called Church History: An Introduction to Research Methods and Resources, 2nd edition, by James E. Bradley and Richard A. Muller. This is yet another book I want to recommend to my viewers as an especially valuable resource for the study of church history, and it was voted on out of a list of such books by my legendary Bishop tier and up supporters. And so if you want to have a say in what I recommend next, as well as for all other types of videos I produce, head on over to my locals and become a supporter today. With that said, let's begin. The book's physical format and binding is nothing special, including a glossy cover and measuring at just about 22.5 centimeters long, 15 centimeters wide, and just under 2 centimeters thick. As such, it's a fairly standard binding and print for an academic release, and is good quality overall. It will not lay flat, but neither will you be fighting with the pages to keep it open. Regarding the content itself, this book is unique compared to others that many fellow church history enthusiasts or even academics would read, in that only 60 of its 293 pages are concerned with the philosophical and historical questions of church history as a subject, while the rest of the text is concerned with practical advice and pointing the reader to specific resources. Put another way, the first 50 or so pages have you do the theory, and the rest have you do the praxis. Even more than just simple advice, close to half of the book is one giant bibliography. It lists what the authors deem to be the most important and useful works on the various subtopics of church history. Given the nature of the bibliography, they do not, for the most part, list works on very specific questions, such as the manuscript history of Augustine's City of God or the philosophical foundations of Thomas Cranmer's Eucharistology. Rather, the bibliography provides more general works, whether they are general church histories or church histories of specific regions, academic journals, collections of patristic works, or even other bibliographies. This is fantastic. However, it is important to note that the bibliography is somewhat dated and will only become more dated with time, as it was published back in 2016, which was 9 years ago. It is therefore necessary to note that any significant works of church history published after this book's publication date, and even shortly leading up to it, given the process of publication, will not be included. Some notable examples of this include Wolfram Kinzig's A History of the Early Christian Creeds, a massive 800-page tome on, well, the history of the early Christian creeds, which was just published last year in 2024. Another example is Peter Marshall's Heretics and Believers, which is, as far as I've read, the new gold standard in the history of the English Reformation at large, which was published in 2017. And finally, as a final example, Stephen C. Carlson's critical edition of the fragments of the exposition of the Dominical sayings by Papias of Hierapolis, which was published in 2021. With that said, so long as you keep this limitation of the bibliography in mind, you will still find a wealth of excellent resources, since their worth is not automatically lessened by the passage of time. So that covers the overall content of the book, but now I wish to highlight a couple of chapters that I personally found most helpful. The first is a subchapter called The Emergence of Critical Church Historiography, which traces the historical origins and development of church history as a discipline. It points to and summarizes major works of the past few centuries that helped to form the field, such as the late 17th century Impartial History of the Church and of Heretics by Gottfried Arnold, among others, emphasizing the development of church history in the sense of an impartial historical inquiry, as opposed to the more apologetic aims of Rome and the Reformation. Not that there's anything wrong with that at all. I engage in that all the time. And I'm right. Reading this chapter gives a deep sense of perspective to the reader on engaging in church history, by way of showing him how the concepts and methods he employs came to be, along with reflection on just what the purpose of church history really is. The other chapter of note is the appendix, where the authors list online resources for the study of church history. This section is especially helpful as, unlike the books in the rest of the bibliography, the reader can just go to the resource immediately, for the most part, through a URL on his phone or computer. I was reading through this section recently out of curiosity and found a really awesome website called the Clergy of the Church of England database, which is a near comprehensive database of Church of England clergy from 1540 to 1835, including details like when they were ordained, when they received certain academic degrees, among other things, making it an incredibly invaluable resource for the research of Anglicanism or English church history. These two chapters I just sampled here are but a tiny, tiny fraction of the wealth of information contained in this book of very modest size. Even just summarizing each chapter would take a video series of its own. Now we come to the question of who I think this book is for. On the whole, I believe anyone with even a casual interest in church history should pick it up, as it basically holds the hand of the reader in directing him where he needs to go. But this book is especially useful, and I'd argue even necessary, for those engaged in the serious study of church history as part of one's vocation, whether at a university or seminary, or even informally, as has been my situation for years now. With this book, you will save countless hours of research time in finding what you need, and you will get a basic yet critical primer on the foundations of church history as a discipline. In light of this, I also greatly recommend that lecturers and professors of church history point their students to this text, but this recommendation is likely superfluous, as from what I know, this book is more or less a standard text in church history courses at seminaries like Moore Theological College in Sydney. Either way, if you dabble in church history as a hobby, this book will be quite useful, but if you engage in serious study of church history or even teach it, then the book really is a must-have. As of this video's recording date, the book can be purchased at the usual major retailers such as Amazon, Abe Books, bookshop.org, and others. As for local Australian booksellers, I sadly couldn't find any shops with the book in stock, again, as of the day of recording, and most didn't even have a listing. The only exception I could find is Kurong, but they do not have any in stock, and it does not appear that they are bringing in more, as there isn't even an option to order extra ahead of time. So the best bet for fellow Australians is to stick with the major online retailers or go to a local university or college library that has a copy. And that is all I have for today. Thank you very much for watching. If this video has persuaded you to pick up the volume, then please do let me know in the comments, and even more, if you have found other sources in the book that were of a great benefit to you, drop a comment for that as well. Thank you again for watching, and consider becoming a supporter on my locals to help me improve the quality and quantity of content and eventually turn this into a full-time job. Have a lovely day or evening, and God bless.